Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Believe It or Not, episode 130 of Into the Outer Realms. Now, my intro is going to be a little different tonight, although I will play the show intro, as I always do with music by my son Jeremy, and Tanya's voice is on it, so it's like she's still here, which is terrific. As you know, we cover a lot here, because I'm not necessarily working on a theory of everything, but you know that I'm very into parallels and patterns. So the data has to come from a wide array of places, or else we're looking at things through a narrow scope, which is getting most people, getting society, getting the mass media, getting mainstream journalism, politics into a lot of trouble. We all know. So tonight we're gonna get away from disclosure. We're gonna get away from Nazi occult. We're gonna get away from this and that. And the guest tonight is amazing. Her energy is amazing. She's written this wonderful book, The Liminal Odyssey, the alchemical power of the spaces in between. In May, as you know, I did 2 episodes about a man who has inspired me so much in my life, Joseph Campbell. And I talk about the hero's journey, and I talk about it in a very traditional way, as storytellers do. We move, separation, initiation, return. Within that, there's 12 stages where we meet our mentors and we do all that. Well, Sande Hart has done all of that, but she's talking about the spaces in between the stages where so many good things happen, the nigredo, the alchemical matter of manifestation. So I'm going to let her talk about it. She's the expert. Just want to set it up for you. So welcome, everyone. You're in for a massive treat tonight. Just a very positive energy. Hello to Ronald and CL and Michael and Lori. Michael and CL are going to be with me on October 8th. We're going to talk about the shadow, because on September 29th, I'm doing a solo show on archetypes, which I hope is really going to help you. There's 4 archetypes that we all have. And then we have our individual archetypes. And I'll talk about my archetypes, but you can talk about your archetypes. We'll talk about how they work, how they function. I'm very excited about everything. As you know, folks, we need a little more excitement and passion in our life. So let's roll the opening, come back with Sande Hart's bio, and get her on screen to talk to you all tonight. Where is it there?
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey
into the outer realms.
Outer Realmers, I love you all saying hello and how are you to each other in the chat room. We're one big community here. I'm so happy to see that. That's wonderful. So if you have questions for Sande throughout the show, as always, I may put it up on the screen. I find it becomes a little distracting for some of our guests, so I may just read them or ask them, but know that I am watching. And so let's read the bio and get on with this, shall we? Sande Hart is an award-winning leader in the fields of women's empowerment and interfaith community building. She founded the Women's Interfaith International Grassroots Organization, S.A.R.A.H, or the Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope, the morning of 9/11. An instinct to gather women of diverse faiths to protect all that they consider sacred, which is now in its 20th year. She founded and served as director of Charter for Compassion's Women and Girls sector, served as a chair for the United Religions Initiative for North America, and serves on the Women's Task Force for the Parliament of World Religions. She's also the founder of Compassionate California. How has she made an hour to be on our show? I'm so honored. Sande is currently being inducted into the Women's Oral History Library of Claremont Colleges. Ladies and gentlemen, Outer Realmers, please welcome Sande Hart. Sande, hi.
Hi, Joey. Hello, everybody. I'm so tickled to be here.
Thank you. So we have a lot of you do have so much inspiring things to say, stories to tell, your personal stories, your journey. So starting with, and I have some of the book there up on the screen, which is nice, and we're going to talk about this cover at the end of the program. We have to, but the Liminal Odyssey. Define that for us. How did the theory develop?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that question. The theory developed as I was writing the book. I really set out to tell one story that I've been urged to tell for about 15 or 20 years, about this wild experience that happened to me in 1982 at a No Nukes rally. And it's this fantastic story, and it was kind of like a little human interest story. I thought it, was interesting. So, but again, my friends and family have been urging me to write that story, but I just didn't have enough of a story to write. And then I heard this word liminal, and I learned it to mean the space between, the threshold, a space between crisis and action, dilemma and choice, the space between, or in this evolutionary growth spurt we are in right now, the space between our thoughts. It's not so much the space, but what we do in that space that makes it liminal, right?
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about, well, what's my liminal story here? What was going on inside of me? And it just completely expanded my experience of what happened in 1982 at that event that I'm writing about, which is chapter 1. And all of a sudden, like 11 more stories just poured out of me. And then what happened is I'm writing these stories, I'm discovering that I can relate every story or every lesson that I had or any lesson that I learned during the course of that particular story was rooted in a science, a philosophy, indigenous wisdom, shared knowledge from a plethora of places that, okay, so I'd write about that per chapter. And then, so now basically I have my stories that are anchored with a philosophy or a science or what have you, and in most cases, many different. And my story of how I came to that understanding and basically in practical real life, living it out. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I need to change the name of the book to something regarding liminal, because that's really what's important here. It's not so much about the stories, because the stories are I think interesting, but important for me to tell personally. And the alchemizing element or condition that was, relevant in that particular story. But what was it really developing for me as I stepped back and looked at it? I thought, oh, maybe this is a mapping. I can maybe lay over this the hero's journey, because in 1982 that was my call to action. And in this story, I was meeting my mentor, and then I come to meeting the villains, and and so on until the place of return, right at the end of the book. But I thought, it's just not enough. Journey just isn't cutting it. The liminal journey just isn't cutting it. And then I got the vision, and I think you'll all appreciate this. Out in the wild frontier of the wide open space, the darkness that George Lucas it does such a great job of sailing us through in this big, beautiful spaceship, right? Whether we turn left or right or up or down or inside out or turn upside down, it's all our choice what direction we go. And so I thought, oh, Odyssey is such a bigger, wider word, and there's so much more to an Odyssey. So what do we do in that liminal space? Let's turn it into an Odyssey. And voila, the title of the book.
Awesome. You read my mind, because I was going to add, right, the hero's journey, but right, we think of Odysseus and we think of these big, the first hero stories that first inspired us. That is amazing. So you mentioned the alchemical power. Of course, it's in the subtitle, the alchemical power of the spaces in between. What does that mean to you? Where's the right? So Joe Campbell goes, you go into the cave you fear to enter, and that's where the treasure lies. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, yeah. You're a poet. You'll appreciate this. There's a beautiful prayer and the one sentence in this prayer by Reverend Lisa Lee. She's with Unity Church. And the sentence goes, "It is the child in us that knows to ask, where am I, or how do I get there, is to miss the crimson red rose growing out of the crack in the sidewalk."
Wow.
Whew, full body, right?
Yeah.
So how do we pause and pay attention to what we're just stepping over every day?
Yeah, that's like Shel Silverstein.
Yeah.
Growing up, it's and that's been part of my journey, is just slow down. Because we're moving, before the show, Sandy and I were talking. I was talking about, and you guys know about my journey with the hero's journey, but in a 2-hour screenplay, in a 90-minute play now, which is about all an American audience can take in the theater, non-musical, everything drives. It drives. And that's what we grow up with, Sandy. You got to move. You got to go. I mean, I wrote a play about teenage suicide, and what I found during my research is these kids are under so much pressure to perform that they literally just can't do it anymore. They just can't do, right? AP classes. And if you don't finish college in 3 years, and if you don't go to the right college. So I appreciate all of that. So as you were, so this is interesting. I talked to so many authors who say there was a guiding hand. I just trusted. I sat down and I didn't have the full plan, or the plan changed. So you alluded to that. So let me ask you that as the first part. Did you feel there was this guiding hand, muses or the universe or source that was leading you?
Before 9/11, I really wouldn't consider myself spiritually aware.
Okay.
I think that I was, as I say in the book, probably my angel stamped spiritual potential on my forehead. Like, she'll get there one day, something will happen and she'll wake up. But I don't think in those cases before I discovered, those guiding hands, and I'll answer that. It was just, I didn't have a choice in the matter. I could not speak up. I could not start a wave or a chant, or I could not jump in with both feet, to what I was doing. Often didn't even question it, and knew as I'm jumping in, wow, I don't know what's going to happen on the other side of this, but I just didn't have a choice. Then I started coming into my spirituality, and I love in your introduction and your wife's voice saying, oh, what was it, that the plain beyond the easy to explain?
Yeah.
It's spirituality. Not so easy to explain, right?
Yeah.
About what you can't be, beyond what you can explain. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm totally butchering that.
No.
So I started waking up to that, and perhaps some of it was my age too, or just the folks I was paying attention to and hanging around. But it really began when I started questioning assumptions, which goes back to what you were saying when you were talking about, this drive that we have as a society, that we have to do, and buy to be happy, and not slow down to the speed of awe and wonder and paying attention to our body, paying attention to that, whatever it is. But to your question, when I started slowing down, I started and going through this journey, I discovered my relationship with my ancestors. Right now, I can feel my grandmother's hands on my shoulders and my grandfather's hands on my head. Called it my kepi, which is Yiddish, yeah. And so I know that I'm on the right program right now, having the right conversation with the right person, with the right listeners. So thank you all.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for
Questions?
sharing that.
Yes.
So as you laid over the hero's journey, I'm assuming, having looked at your work and read the book and all of that, that it illuminated your own life stories. That's what we hope. Is that not only moving forward, but we learned something about, we can sort of analyze. Joseph Campbell said a beautiful thing, and I believe he was quoting someone else, where he said that our life seems so random and chaotic. But when we get to the end of it, we look back and it looks like a beautifully crafted novel. So in terms of victories and things you might have missed by slowing down, but also trauma and shadow, how did your own liminal odyssey all of a sudden illuminate what had been your life story?
Well, this actually, what I want to say right now is talk about Kairos time.
Oh, yeah, please.
If we could, yeah, because looking back and saying, oh, some of those punches in the stomach, some of those things that knocked the wind out of me, kept me in bed for days or weeks, some of those things that were just so traumatizing for me at the time and really had me reeling, all worked out in Kairos time. That's God's time. Aristotle says Kairos time is the space where the truth will be revealed. So, yeah, trust is a big one too, and trusting that those traumas that happen to us, big T, small t, whatever kind of traumas we have, that they're part of our growth, and it's our responsibility and our privilege to grow into them. And quantum science, and I'm going to ask you this question, in terms of quantum science and what science is saying about the speeding up of the universe, and the fact that the first quantum revolution was right when we discovered we live in a mental universe. It's not a machine, right?
Right.
And of course that just sort of supercharged patriarchy to the max, right? And now, moving into, physicists say we're moving into a second quantum revolution. Would you agree?
We are. And, 2012 came and went, December 2012 in the Mayan calendar. And so many people were so disappointed. But when Tanya and I look back at our dream journals and our synchronicity journals, and you and I are going to talk about synchronicity, which is cool. We see that these things don't happen like this. A shift doesn't boom and we're suddenly in another. Maybe in the micro a little, we will have a spontaneous shift into another dimension or something, but these things take time. So I believe that we are, there's the Schumann resonance, I think is what you were talking about, the heartbeat of Mother Earth, of Gaia, and it's changing us. And I do believe, as hard as it is now, it's, and I said this to you off camera, I'll say it on now. Tanya and I, it's about us as a couple, and then it flows out to the kids, and then it flows out to family and friends, and then it flows out to our beautiful audience and our clients and all these people, and then it flows out into the larger world. So we're living more and more in Kairos time, which Gay Hendricks calls Einstein time, which is also a cool kind of idea, where time and space break down because you're following your bliss, which you're going to talk about. So, and I believe that we are, and there's a question that I'm going to ask you later, but I'm going to ask it now, because I think it ties in, and the role of women in this period of evolutionary growth. That is a revolutionary statement, because there are so many people that going, no, we're de-evolving. Humanity's dying. We're killing the planet. Climate change. Ooh, I don't want to get out of bed. I can't face it. We got the midterms coming up. And that's a huge fulcrum moment for the United States. So knowing that we both agree that we started a shift, whenever that was, what is the role of women? And of course, speak to men too, because I want to help, right? but primarily, women. What is the role? What's the focus?
Yeah, I have a few answers for that.
Great.
The most practical is that women make up 85%, generally speaking, of the buying decisions in the home. Generally speaking, the last survey was 85, sometimes it's 87. It depends on what study you're looking at. And that means we have a lot of power with our buying decision, what corporations we support, and how much time and energy are we putting into looking into those. I suggest everybody look up what's going on at Nestle and what Nestle is doing, to impacting women who are breastfeeding around the world. And that's all I'll say about that. And how many Nestle products are we purchasing? So how are we, with our buying decisions at the market that we go to every day or every week, how are we either promoting this demise of our environment and those things that divide us, which generally are corporations in a large way, because there's the power right there. So, but we're the ones giving them our money. Okay, so that's the practical answer to that. And also the fact that since the agrarian age, we as a society learned how to become separate from the natural rhythms of the planet and our relationship with the planet. And women are closest to that natural rhythm of the planet and to the moon. I mean, our moon cycle, our menstrual cycle is in direct alignment with the cycles of the moon. That's more than a synchronicity, right?
Yeah.
So how are we remembering our relationship to the planet? And I'll just say that the reason why we became separate, I don't want to leave you hanging on that one, is that we learned how to commoditize Earth. We learned that when we put a seed to its death, that it's going to bring forth something that we can now consume for our own personal use and commerce. And then, okay, we're just going to take down this forest, and and now that creates a division between us. Also around that age, an era, women were, honored largely before that, especially for being the life givers and for being an important voice in the community. But when we got into the agrarian age and the stronger of the species started doing the heavy lifting and collecting the money, and the women, of course, we do what we do. We take care of the babies. We can't go out and do that. So that just very generally, very rudimentary explanation of the agrarian age and how we became separate. Our role is to remember our body, remember our sacred nature, remember our voice, because we've been duped into believing that our voice isn't that important or shouldn't be valued. Here's a real simple practice. And I suggest we all do it, because I think it helps us practice not only how often we discount ourselves, but how and especially, and women do too, but it's also a way of practicing the muscle of awareness in itself, right? And that is, pay attention to how often you use the word trust. Not trust, sorry. That's some post-COVID brain fog we were talking about earlier.
I understand.
How often you use the word just, J-U-S-T. I just am reaching out. No, I'm reaching out. I just want my voice to be heard. No, I want my voice to be heard. It's a simple, tiny little silly thing to do. But the more you notice it, the more you recognize how often we're not really, recognizing the power of our words and our language and keeping our thoughts and our language impeccable. That's another thing women can do, is pay attention to our power that we have and how we use it and how we discount ourselves in that as well.
Right. And I'm going to be a little presumptuous here. And sometimes sometimes I don't get it right, and the guest tells me, and that's fine. It's a learning. But you were talking about specifically about corporations, but mass media, some of these mega church preachers, politicians, certainly, they're all selling something, and we all energetically, intellectually, at the polls, where we go and spend our time and who we listen to.
Oh, yeah.
Would you say that that's true? You have to be cautious. The same way you don't buy from Nestle, or I haven't used Exxon gasoline in 15 years. Now, I'm just one person and I haven't brought Exxon down, but that's my own personal choice.
Yeah.
Going back to 9/11, so I guess it's 20 years. But am I wrong to say that
Well,
it could be extended out?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's all we have control over. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
Right? Our
Yeah.
dollar is our vote, and our vote is our dollar.
Yeah.
And
Right.
women, please vote. Please vote. And question assumptions too. Yeah. So
Yeah. So and if I made an assumption, I apologize. And so you talked about the personal. We're going to talk about the personal again. We're going to talk about the micro and the meta. But and you started to talk about this, how our collective journey as human beings, the liminal odyssey that we're taking together. Right. So I guess I'm asking strategies to stay connected with each other, right? Because so many people feel alone. They feel isolated.
Yeah. I don't know that I can answer that, because, it's up to the individual, really. And my heart goes out to those who are really feeling the weight of this. I talk about the trust frequency in the book, and Connie Baxter Marlowe and Andrew Cameron Bailey wrote this beautiful book called The Trust Frequency. And in it, they have these 7 A's, and one is to check our attitude, question assumptions, attentiveness and awareness. And I'm on the spot now and I'm not thinking of the others, but our attitude makes a lot of difference, right? And this morning, I'll just give you an example. I wake up in despair sometimes. Yeah. I woke up this morning just feeling like, before my eyes were open, it was just kind of, I don't even think my cognitive skills were 100% functioning, but I woke up in a sense of, ugh. And I sit up and I'm like, okay, I know the first thing to do is I need to go within. I need to invite in the masters, my grandmothers, Jesus, Paramahansa Yogananda, my Zaidi, my grandmother, and all those that I feel called at the moment, my angels who have names and don't have names. And the first thing, before I was even completely upright in bed, I heard gratitude.
Yes.
And that's, that's so easy to say. It's so easy to say, just go to gratitude. That's the only thing I've got. That's the only thing I've got. And then all of a sudden things start shifting for me. And I believe we create our reality. I really do. And that puts some personal responsibility on us. But what's the alternative?
Yeah, right. No, I agree. And, Wayne Dyer, and I believe you talk about Wayne Dyer in the book, and I just love his work. But he said, when you change the way you see this, the things you see change.
Yeah.
And gratitude is my, Tanya and I have kind of been locked in a situation for 4 years now through COVID and all. But when we can go, look what we do have. Look at this. And, before we did the show tonight, we sat at our fire pit and just enjoyed the hints of the changing of the season. And if you can that's why I just see it at these concentric circles. I saw a great quote today, Sandy. And I forget who said it, but when I was young, I was clever. So I wanted to change the world. Now I'm older and I'm wise and I want to change myself.
Bam.
And that's been my journey, So
Yeah. There you
yeah,
go.
that's
Nice job on
cool.
that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So
Yeah.
it's time to tell us the story that brought you before me, because it brought the book in 1982. Take
Oh,
us through it.
it was a hot day. 1982 at the Rose Bowl in Southern California, 100,000 people there for a no nukes rally and music festival called Peace Sunday. And I was given 4 tickets, and I saw the lineup of speakers, and I knew I missed my Woodstock because I was born in 61 and a little too young and not on the other coast, so didn't get that, but I always wanted that sort of experience. So my 3 friends and I went, and we're sitting stage left and pretty close to the stage, and that's when I heard the call to action. Someone left their dog in the car. If that's your dog, go let him out. And I started this chant. What about the dog? What about the dog? In between speaker and band, speaker and band. And it didn't take very long before our section started chanting with me. Now, I just expected that somebody would come back and report, hey, yeah, somebody got the dog out of the car. You guys chillax. It's going to go have a great day. And don't forget your sunscreen and drink plenty of water. But no, we didn't hear an answer. And we'd start up again. And Joey, the moment my DNA rearranged was when I heard the chant coming from the other side of the stadium. And later that day, I walked in from the concession stand, and it was going on without me. And I'm like, okay, there's something to pay attention to here. But I was 21. There was a lot of things floating in the air, and I definitely was not yet into my spirituality or even my environmentalism or anything. I honestly went for the music, and something deeper, of course, being a part of a cause,
Right.
But I didn't really know enough about it. But I definitely was handed the tickets by a music producer who was a friend who gave me these tickets. And then around 7:00, the MC comes to the stage. I think everyone was chanting again, and said, "So you want to know about the dog?" And I just remember the crowd going crazy. My girlfriend elbowing me. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? And I didn't. She said, "So you want to know about the dog? The dog is fine." Just remember trash, random objects flying in the air. Everybody was so excited. I don't think Fleetwood Mac or Bette Midler got as big of a rousing applause. Then Stevie Wonder comes to the microphone, and it dawned on me, he wouldn't have gotten, because he wanted to, he had asked for 5 minutes of silence so he could pray for peace. He wouldn't have gotten that if that big question of the day wasn't answered.
Whoa.
And I almost never told that story, but years later, I was at an event, and we were all supposed to go up to the front of the room and share an interesting story. And I'm like, I don't have any interesting stories, nothing worth telling. I haven't done anything remarkable in my life at this point. I've got kids, I'm raising a family, I'm a great soccer mom, but I kind of had this mundane sort of existence, I thought. And I told this story, and eyebrows raised, and I'm like, oh, there's something there. And my girlfriend who was there said, you got to tell that story. And she's been my major, cheerleader. And I sat down for the 3rd time to write it and learned about this word liminal, and the rest is, in your hands or on your desk right now.
Well, I just want to say, having read your book, I dispute that you didn't have any other stories to tell prior to that. Although that was the story, obviously, you were meant to tell. So we have a question, and I'm going to bring it back so we can unpack the beginning of this dog story, because I think there's something really, really important here. But our good friend Jessica of the show, she says, which is harder, changing you or the world? So here's how I want to contextualize it. You're in a stadium with 100,000 people, and you are compelled to start this chant. It's gutsy. It's not a simple thing. At least once a week, we probably all have situations, and not in a stadium of 100,000 people, sometimes in a room of 10 people, sometimes with our own family, we're compelled to speak, and we don't. and we don't speak.
Yeah.
And so that story unfolds in a completely different way because, as we know, we don't have to answer that call to adventure. You answered that call, and you started a movement. Arguably, you started a movement, and which is amazing. So how do you see that? Which is harder, change you or change the world? And then I have a thought, but I want to give you first crack.
That is such a great question. Thank you
Yeah.
for asking that question. Well, my immediate response was, well, of course it's me,
Yeah.
because I can't change the world if I don't change me. I'd be a huge hypocrite.
Yeah.
I want you to behave and not me. So yeah, that's my answer right there. That's all we can do. It's really the only thing we have control over. And I should say also that when I change me, I'm changing those around me too. And I'm also choosing to be around. I'm finding I gravitate more towards those who I resonate with, and vice versa. And what the best we can do is shift a culture. And culture is nothing more than a collective agreement by all of us. So what are we agreeing to? What are we paying for? What are we voting for? How are we using our words? That has to start with us. And it registers in the space between our thoughts, in the liminal space.
Yeah.
Love that.
Thank you. Guys, when Brent Hunter was on, and Brent has this little thing he's trying to do to get the General Council of the UN to have more power than the Security Council. This tiny little thing that this man is starting a movement. That's his where's the justice instead of where's the justice in that? And what did Brent say? And I agree with you 100%, Sandy. Our situation is a collective agreement that it's our situation. So it's not an easy thing, but it's a simple thing to go. And I'm sure you encounter it too. We're going to talk about these groups you've started and other movements that you've started. People, well, we've never done it that way. We've never done it that way. Okay, well, I have never been in the room, and now I'm not talking from ego. I'm simply talking. There's a new ingredient in the stew, so let's cook it a little and see how it tastes. So I love that. I think, because Martin Luther or Satyagraha, which is Truth Force, right? That's a personal. Yeah. I gotta have my own truth force between I have anything to say outward. So let's talk now about the practical aspects of the book. Because folks, if you read the book review, I said, look, there are so many of these books. It's a giant industry. So when I get a book like this, I go, what's new? What is valuable? If there's not a tool that I can add to my toolbox, I don't want to be reminded about what tools I already have. And part of that is, and you alluded to it as you were writing the book, what was your development process of the 12 skills that are featured in the book? Like, how did that unfold?
I'm laughing because it was such a messy process.
That's lovely.
It was chaotic in a way. It was chaos and order, and then rearranging of paragraphs, and it just unfolded. It looked very different from when it ended up looking very different from when I started it. And because I listened carefully, I was learning how to pay attention to what wanted to be said, what needed to be taken out, what more needed to be said. The process of writing it was me just listening. A couple of chapters, one in particular, wrote itself in real time. And this was a chapter where I talk about synchronicities and an experience I had. And I'm like, wow, there's something really powerful that really has a place here. And so I'd write it down. And then I'd go sit on the beach and I'd write some more. And I'd have even more experiences. And then I'm reminded of my relationship with Mother. And I see we've got some Southern California or Californian listeners here. I love you. And it was Grandmother Ocean who called me, was calling me and has called me all my life and been she's my first mentor, my family, my chosen family. And so just as I'm writing about, synchronicities, more and more synchronicities start to happen. I think everybody should I read somewhere in the question, I'm trying not to pay too much attention because I need to listen to you, Joey, but I can't help it. This is so juicy, these great comments coming over.
Yeah, they're terrific people.
Someone had written that they write that way too, where paying attention to, what's going on. And that was all I did. It's real-time discovery and disclosure. And I have to tell you, so much more disclosed itself after the book was published.
Oh, talk about that.
Well, I, for example, more synchronicities, right? The idea that this is more than a stringing of stories. It truly is a philosophy, even though I kind of figured there was a philosophy emerging, because I know I couldn't find anything about, like you said in the beginning of our call, our time together, that there's this talk about the hero's journey, but what about the spaces in between? I couldn't find anything on that. I couldn't even find I didn't really even understand the word liminal in its entirety. I'm discovering more. That was a big thing that I learned more about the depth and breadth of liminality. And that it's more commonly used than I knew, but I didn't hear anybody using it. I could barely even say the word, liminal. It's funky, but yeah. So, and that's what happens when you journal, right?
Yeah.
Get out of the way. You let the spirit move from your heart to the hand, bypass, your ego and all those other things. Yeah. I had to check my humility a lot too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Also I learned about the impeccability of my words, because I'm like, I can't write that, because if I write that, even though that's the image I want people to think and I want myself to live into, my kids are going to read this and they're going to know I'm full of it. Or I got to be real. And who am I serving if I'm not?
Right.
So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, that's that other big A. That really was an aha moment for me, probably about 12 years ago, through Brene Brown, authenticity.
Yeah.
Man, if you can show up and you can be authentic, that is a game changer. Yeah. And now I'm to the point where I can be genuinely authentic. It's getting the voices after the authenticity when I'm alone, right? Because I'll wake up in the morning and, tomorrow morning I'll wake up and I'll go, did I put my foot in my mouth here? Did I not ask this question right? Did I put Sandy on the spot? So that's what I'm working through. But that's another one of those big A's. The authenticity is huge if you can get there.
It's a practice.
Yeah.
It's really a practice. Awareness, questioning assumptions, and then ultimately discovering your divine assignment, your planetary assignment. What only can you do? Do it. Because you're not serving anybody, including yourself or your soul or your angels or whoever you consider your higher source and your inner source, however you look at it, whatever you call it. You're not serving anyone unless you are truly showing up in I love the word integrity. And that's not a statement of morality, because that word can be seen that way. It's your wholeness, The integrity of this chair is strong. And I'm so glad, because I'd fall right now if it weren't. The integrity of, something that's whole is truly 100% in its authenticity. And only it can do. This chair can't go be the television set, Right. Please be you. But this takes practice and awareness. Start doing some work on calling in your ancestors and looking at some patterns in your behavior that might have come from your parents or your parents' parents. And it's like, okay, I can finally forgive my dad for this thing, because I can see his pattern that he grew up with.
Yes.
But my ancestors don't want me to live. This is what came up for me in the last chapter about being in Auschwitz and Birkenau, where my ancestors don't want me to suffer that burden of these behavior patterns. They're hopefully rejoicing that I'm trying to, break open and, find new solutions to old problems, but also break these patterns and how I respond, how I think, how I speak.
That's beautiful. I about 3 years ago, I because of a comment someone made, I really started to look into my ancestry, and now I'm deep diving. I have the Sicilian flag above my head. I'm almost 100% Sicilian. I'm reading the history. I was doing that before the show, but three of my great grandmothers showed up at a really crucial time, and I think that they feel the same way. There's no looking back. It's interesting to be a second generation immigrant to the United States, because I really don't have any of those ties to the major critical race theory and all these things that are happening now. So it's interesting, but Sicily has its own, and when you think Sicilian, you think, oh, hot tempered and vengeful, and so we have these genetic things that we're working through. I understand that, but let's talk about synchronicity, because synchronicity and manifestation. Let's go with synchronicity first, but really for you, like reading the story of the heart-shaped rocks, me, that's really manifesting. That's really bringing thought into reality and alchemically turning a thought, a request, into matter. And I don't know if so synchronicity first. Right. So in the Celestine prophecies, it's number one, recognize them. Okay. So we all hear that. That's the first step. But you talk about it so much more deeply. So the process of synchronicity for you.
Yeah, well, it all starts with awareness, right? And willingness, intention, right? I really want to answer this question, but I can't not respond to Jessica's question.
Oh,
do you mind if I just? No, that's okay. I'm not supposed to be.
Please do. No, that's fine. I love that you're the most engaged with the chat room that anyone's ever been, and that's beautiful.
I admit I tried not reading this because I'm like, oh, these are so good. Yeah, let's have.
If I can find it, I'll put it up.
Jessica, this question of letting self-doubt. Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
I think. In my Thanksgiving and gratitude, in my book where I thank everybody who helped me, I thank Dowdy Dora for constantly being on my heels, because every time she showed up and she was nipping at my heels and bugging my, irritating my senses, I would stop, breathe, and go, okay, why? Where's that self-doubt coming from? Why? Where did that stem from? And follow the threads back to where that doubt came from. Who told you that your voice wasn't that important? Or what is the fear? And just spend some time there and ask your angels, call in your ancestors, light a candle, walk in nature, whatever your methodology is. And just spend some time in that, because that is because working on women's repowerment, and boy, this is what it's all about, self-doubt, because we have been duped believing that our voice isn't that important, that we should doubt ourselves. It's all a trick.
Yeah. Okay.
So promise me, Jessica, you'll do that. Okay, back to synchronicities.
Okay, I just want to interject. This is the practical of the theoretical. It's not theoretical at all. Mm-hmm. And I know Jessica. First of all, she's an outstanding mother. She's a wonderful wife. She's a brilliant writer. I had the honor of editing one of her books. She's a brilliant writer, and she shows up. She's generous of heart. So as she's moving through her cycles of her hero's journey, it's those spaces in between where you go, I got through that one, but can I face the next one? And I think that's where we question. Like I said, I'm doing the show now. I'm not self-judging. I've gotten to the point where I'm in the moment. I'm living in the moment. But it's going to be after this stage, when I go away, when I go to talk to Tanya, the first thing I'm going to do tonight, because she's watching, I'm going to go, how did I do? Do you think I did okay? Did I honor the guest? So I just wanted to, let's go to synchronicity, but I just wanted to say, this is the practical value of the work, folks. This is not theoretical. You just watched it. You just watched Sande in action with one of my dear friends. I feel honored to have watched that. And she says, I think I live in the spaces in between sometimes. Yeah. What would you say to that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because
Cool.
enlightened self-interest, right? That's
Yeah.
all you can, when another lives in that space, I benefit, you benefit, the world. This is how we heal the world. We all benefit. Enlightened
Yeah.
self-interest. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
love you're making some great turns of phrases. Enlightened self-interest. I love. And you also said, folks, I hope you noticed this. Everybody talks about women's empowerment.
Yeah.
And you said
Repower.
repowerment. Because that's right. And Joe talked about it. God bless him. You know, the patriarchy of the church came in, and suddenly one Mary is a virgin because we can't, go through the sloppy, and the other one is a whore, and that has been so disproved. And this subjugation, the disempowerment. So of course the repowerment. I hope that all of my lady friends, all you goddesses out there, start using that one. Repowerment. Wow.
I'm so glad you brought up Mary Magdalene, and also that the documentary, the Burning Times.
Yes.
Also another, and it's right there. It's history, how we've been
Oh,
duped. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm owning my crone. I want to be a crone when I grow up. I'm not yet there, but if I wore t-shirts with sayings on them, that's what it would be.
That's a pretty good one. But let me ask you, and we are going to get to synchronicity, but
Okay.
it was on my list anyway. So maiden, mother, crone, right? These three
Yeah.
stages where, again, it feels like a journey. But do you agree? You can call on any one of the. You may have a primary stage. So just like your archetypes, I may be living in a solid teacher archetype, but that doesn't mean that the rest of my archetypes are closed off to me. Would you say the same? I mean, do you? Again, I'm going to be presumptuous, and I'm going to say you have very powerful crone power, very powerful crone energy.
Wow, what a great compliment. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you
So
very much.
do you think that that's true, that you can
Totally.
move?
Oh yeah, and I can live in all three of them. I feel really playful and creative right now. I feel responsible, and I also, I'm calling in some wisdom that's surprising the heck out of me. So thank you. So
I'm not at all surprised. So
I need
let's do it.
the whole package right here.
Cool. Yeah. Amen. You definitely do. So synchronicities, go.
Gosh. So many amazing, and a lot of them I'm like, oh, I can't tell you how many times I grabbed my head like this and said, wow, I never put those two things together, two different stories, right? And so, yeah, just paying attention and being willing to find the synchronicities, and then also trust your body. A lot of times, some synchronicities, and I'd love to share the story about the rocks on the beach, the heart-shaped rocks, because that's the story I mentioned that happened in real time.
Yeah.
But it was a feeling I had, like, and I don't know that I would have been aware of that feeling had I not been practicing body awareness. So the Liminal Odyssey and these 12 skills, it's not just the skills that I mention, and they're additives or they're suggestive tools or skills, right? You probably are using them yourself, but using them collectively, because you create a coherence and an energy that's greater than the sum of its parts when you practice all of those skills together. And I was doing that because I'm writing about it, right? And it's showing up in me, and I'm thinking up because I'm writing about it and moving chapters around and writing, going back and forth to chapters. I'm living all of these skills at once. And that's when I discovered, this comes back to your question, this philosophy of the Liminal Odyssey. It's like, I get what's happening to me now. For the first time, all of these things, all of this awareness is just peaking right now, and it must be because I'm practicing everything in unison, collectively. And that's what happened to me when I was hearing, I was at my daughter's house, and we're in between houses. I literally are looking at our rental right now, where we just moved out of another state to come back home to California. And so I'm not going to show you the floor because it's filled with bubble wrap and boxes. So I'm at her house, and I'm writing about this, and all of a sudden I see a centipede, and I'm like, I haven't seen a centipede, in decades. What's this about? And then it dawned on me, Catherine Skaggs, who did the art for the book, I should say, didn't do it for the book. I begged and pleaded and held my breath till I turned blue before she let me use that part of her artwork, because she doesn't license her stuff like that. So there I go, breaking barriers again.
Yeah.
But you have to let me have that. She's perfect. Anyway, she had just sent me her tarot cards on spirit animals, and I don't know anything about spirit animals. I've never really used tarot cards. At least I didn't at the time, or really truly understood them. But she gifted me this beautiful package of goodies of things that she creates. CatherineSkaggs.com. Please go check her out. And I'm like, oh, why am I seeing this centipede at the same time as having these tarot cards? What's this about? So I start flashing through the cards, like looking at them, going, oh, how cool would it be to find a centipede? Let me just see what happens here. And I didn't find a centipede. I came across the Phoenix Rising card.
Oh, yes.
And I got this crazy full body sensation. Like, what is this about? And then I turned the card over, and I don't remember what it said. I'm reliving those feelings right now. And I'm like, okay, this is something to write about. There's a synchronicity here. And it reminded me of another time I had that feeling. And I'm writing about that. And I talk about being at the Parliament of the World's Religions. And I had this other experience that was otherworldly. But the next day I get up and I take my beach chair, which I typically do, and my little writing desk, my little Michael's $5 writing desk to the beach. And I'm writing some more. And out of the corner of my eye, and I see a rock poking out of the sand. And I'm like, this is not a rocky beach. So that's an unusual rock. And that means something. Now I'm practicing awareness. There's something about that. And then I walk over there and I start to pull the rock out. And before I had it completely revealed out of the sand, I got that same full body. And I knew exactly what I would find. I would find a perfectly symmetrical heart-shaped rock. I mean, not even, okay, it passes. Perfectly symmetric heart-shaped rock. And I'm like, okay, I'm at the right place doing the right thing. Oh, and I've left out the most important part. As I'm writing, I decided to take a little break, and I look at Grandmother Ocean, and I take a breath, and I was paying attention to the waves and listening and reading the waves, which I learned how to do ever since I was a little girl, and felt affirmed. And that's when I found that rock, and I held it up and I said, thank you. I moved down the beach a little ways later, and maybe an hour or so later, because somebody started smoking a cigarette next to me, and I wanted fresh air. And so I moved down the beach, and almost exactly the same, distance from the shore, and just dragged my chair down a bit. And I sit down, and then at the exact same angle I saw something else peeking out of the sand. And I go, okay, I have a feeling. And I go and I pull it out, and it's like, just your typical heart, rock, nothing special. I look, right underneath it is another rock. I knew what it was. It was another heart-shaped rock. And I wish, they're in boxes somewhere. Yeah. I'll have to put it on my website. I'll show. And this was a little less perfect in terms of its symmetric value, but it was tapered at the end. It was thick and it tapered at the end. And I'm like, okay, that means I need to really go deeper with this. And I did. I sat with it a while, and that manifested more of the chapter. But that is an example of paying attention to those things, paying attention to body awareness. And the more you do that, the more things that otherwise seem mundane, like a rock on the beach, become miraculous.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They're affirming. And I think synchronicities, I said it in the book review, synchronicity, because Jung said, Jung and Pauli, I think, Wolfgang Pauli kind of collaborated on synchronicity from a psychological and a physics, which was cool. But an acausal connecting principle, like people go, what the heck do I do with that? That's a lot of gobbledygook words. But this idea that for me, it's a mile marker. So I'm going down the road. I'm not quite sure if I'm on the right path, and a synchronicity happens. And I go, I'm in the right timeline, on the right highway. Just stick with it, baby. Do it. So that's kind of how I define it. And I also want to say, I saw in the audience, some people were saying, I stick with like-minded people. And we need to do that. We all have our tribe because that's our core. But whoever that person was with the cigarette participated in your
Oh,
beautiful journey.
yeah.
And who knows what
Thank
thought, see, that's, what thought did they have to go down to the beach and have a cigarette at that moment? Did they answer a call to adventure that then brought you to that second rock? Because we all find a cool first rock. When you find that cool second rock, you go, okay, Grandmother Ocean, okay, universe, okay, God, I'm listening. And when we're listening, like you said, and that's one of the 12 skills,
Yeah.
man, good stuff comes in, right?
Reverent listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. I never stopped to think about the guy with the cigarette.
And I have Joe Campbell to thank about that too. I mean, he got himself into big trouble on Bill Moyers because he was like, even and to say this to you as a Jewish person, he said even Hitler, evil has a sublimity to it. Evil has a, because there are aspects of Buddhist philosophy where they say everything is exactly as it should be. And that's hard cheese to swallow, as I like to, the English expression, when terrible, terrible things are happening. And we don't need to speak of what they've been. We've all seen them in the past few years, especially. Right. It's really hard to believe that. But each of these people that come into our life, there was a guy I read an interview with in Esquire magazine. I think he was an economist. And he said, I never read anybody's work that I agree with. Life's too short. And I'm too busy. I want to go out. And of course, we need our tribe. We need to, but I think he was making an illustrative point that, oh, what a drag. Now I got to get up and move. Yeah. But that's that push to movement, right? So.
I love that you said that. And I love that comment about sticking with your tribe and how, when you're not with your tribe, how we show up matters and how we perceive what's happened. And yes, Jessica, every story needs a villain to act. That's our catalyst, right? Our activator in most cases, and to show us who we are and give us an opportunity to show up. And how am I going to respond right now?
Yeah.
I think that that's so important. As an interfaith activist, to your point, Joey, I was getting so tired with people agreeing with me because I'm like, how am I really going to heal interfaith reconciliation or bring interfaith reconciliation if everybody who comes to this event is already halfway there or three quarters of the way there, and they're just there to nod their heads in agreement? Yeah. And I was on a panel at the University of California, Irvine, and it was with the Arab Student Union and the Hillel, the Jewish campus group, right after a Lebanese in 2005, I think, or something. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. Yeah, I think it was 2005. There was a conflict, and whatever department it was brought them together and brought a panel of interfaith activists together. And on one side of the room, and now both sides look very close to each other. Everybody resembles one another. They could have been brothers and cousins, right? Well, they really are. Yet I could tell who was who because when the imam spoke, this side of the room had their arms crossed, their legs crossed, their hands or their heads going like this. Yeah. And then when I spoke, or when the rabbi spoke, it was the other side of the room responding the same way. I'm like, okay, now we got it. Now I can make a difference, perhaps, with my words and how I show up and what I say, and how can I speak to that side of the room, not my tribe. So I think that I always say, our kids are watching.
Yeah.
Everybody's watching us. And that's another role of women too. We are the mothers of the community. This is what S.A.R.A.H, our women's interfaith group, was. We were known as the mothers of the community. We were the ones called on to bring healing and reconciliation whenever there was a senseless act of violence on a church or a mosque or a synagogue or a gay bar. We were on their steps with candles and prayers. We were the ones activating the community into community service to bring everybody to focus on their common value of care and caregiving of another, really cross-pollinating, one another. And it was our covert way of interfaith work. You
Oh, I love that.
you can't really judge somebody too harshly if you both care about the food bank and the people who are hungry. So we did that for 7 years. So, but as women, we have, I think that we have that responsibility to show up in our mother archetype.
Yeah. Yeah, and I truly believe, our ancestors are watching. They're watching because they come with wisdom and they come with guidance, and that doesn't come out of nowhere. So they're aware of the journey we're on. And I love that. And the whole idea of indigenous wisdom says think 7 generations ahead.
Right.
Well, if all cultures, all societies had done that, we'd be in a much different place. We'd be in a much different place. Where now I speak to so many people, I'm sure you do too, and they go, I don't know what to tell my children. That is the prevailing as parents right now. I don't know what to tell my kids when they say, is this all going to end? Where's the hope? But I don't know what to say to them. So I think that ancestral wisdom coming in. So let's talk now. I'm going to put some of those behind. Tell us about S.A.R.A.H and the inspiration behind it, because I loved it in the book. People want to know what to do. It didn't start with a grand, big idea. Not really, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, it started with a whisper in my ear. I don't know who was whispering it, but I heard the morning of 9/11. I'm still under the covers, and I turned the news on because I heard something on the radio, and my alarm clock woke me up with the radio. I turned the TV on, and there I saw what everybody else saw that morning of 9/11. I heard gather women. I'm like, okay, I don't know where I'm supposed to find the women and what I'm supposed to do with them once I find them. And by the way, who's whispering in my ear? You remember, I wasn't spiritually woke at that time, but I said yes. It was another one of those moments where I didn't have a choice. Put my feet on the ground and said, okay, what did I just say yes to? I was all wrapped up in my kids' lives. I was the director of sales and marketing for a major home builder. I was living a completely different lifestyle, and my goals and my focus and my cars and my big hair and shoulder pads and, everything was different then. And yet I found the women and I found my sisterhood, and something really remarkable happened to me just by saying yes. And that was that when I opened my door for the first time, because the first meeting was in my home, and the first woman stepped over the threshold, I heard another voice. I heard, get out of the way. And I just and I'm director of sales and marketing. I'm setting goals. I'm driving numbers. I'm inspiring and servant leadership. I'm going through all of that. And yet I'm like, what? I don't have control over this, right? But I got it. And I wanted to learn. So that's when, and I didn't even know anything about convening women in circle. I learned along the way. Others taught me. And so 20 years later, here we are. But we started and we continued to do dialogue circles in our homes, each other's homes, because then you get a real feel and texture and smell of the home and what's it like and how others live and what their hospitality is like. It's a really great way to get to know somebody, because I've always had this innate curiosity about people.
Yeah.
And you really kind of get to the core of who they are when you understand what motivates them, what informs them, and that's the religion and their culture.
Wow. And again, and I don't know, it's kind of been the pattern tonight. You talk so deeply and so well about all this. I just feel like I want to unpack it a little for the audience. To get out of the way in your own home probably was not an accident. Because if you met in a neutral space and you hear a voice and it goes, get out of the way, you kind of go, okay, well, we're in a neutral space. And so, but to open your door, have people come in, but then let them, that feels very roomy to me. I don't know why. Old Persian poet.
I'm a Jewish mama. I'm going to make sure you're fed. You got everything you need. And you pockets your stuff before you walk out the door. I want to know everything that's going on. It's just my tendency in my culture, right? Yeah. So it just came to me very comfortably. I didn't really have to think about it. Yet, you kind of have to have your feet in both ponds, because we have to keep protocol and circle principles, and make sure that, it doesn't become a monologue, but a dialogue sort of a thing, but gosh, we never really had to pull out what the ouch policy,
Yeah.
but it was there, and we knew, and that's another important thing, that we created a safety net. We had an ouch policy. That means if somebody, and it happened, it was, I think, our first meeting actually, where Dossi from Israel and Gada from Lebanon sat on the couch next to one another. They didn't know each other before they sat down, but Gada came in late. That was the only space left to sit on the couch. She sat down, and as they were going around the room talking, I started noticing the body language separating, knees pointing in different directions, and energy there going. And then Gada gets up and walks out of the room, and everyone's like, "What just happened?" There were, I think, 12 women in my living room. And she had come back with the tissue because something that Dossi had said touched her. And Dossi was talking about her mother in a story her mother told her growing up in Israel. And Gada, got so emotional because it was the same story her mother taught her of morality, right? Now, Dossi was in a tank in Gada's neighborhood at one point. We later found out, a year later, that she was in the Israeli army, as all Israelis do go through their time in the army.
Yeah.
But she was actually there during a conflict in Gada's very neighborhood. That Gada played the piano to drown out the sound of the shells and the missiles. So that happened on my couch.
Yeah.
And while the wall came down a little bit between them that they could see one another, it still exists, but that's where our work is in that sweet spot.
That's a beautiful metaphor. There's some great myths and stories about a wall and peeking over the wall. There's some great children's stories too. Oh, don't, all there is a wall. You grow up and you go, never look over the wall, because what's over there? A human being, that especially kids know. I don't know. They got two eyes. They got two, or maybe they don't. But I mean, fundamentally, they look like me. I think too, as I've watched, women are not only disempowered, but they're set in competition with one another.
Yeah.
So you overcame that barrier on multiple levels, just to get two women in a room and work together, rather than, oh, her hair's, oh, she has highlights, and which I don't, all these things. That's amazing. And then to add the layers of culture and what I've seen, the reconciliation work between Palestinians and Israel, that's some of the sharpest reconciliation work, the hardest. And I added a lot of academic journals and things, and those processes to me are fascinating and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And they organically found that common ground with a story, which is what we've been talking about. The power of story. Yeah.
It really is. That night, we heard about a women's group that was meeting in Palestine, right on the seam of Israel and Palestine, called the Interfaith Encounter, Women's Interfaith Encounter. And that was like, okay, well, it wasn't so courageous what I did after all. These women are changing their dialect to cross borders because nothing was going to stop them from getting together and talking about healing and peace in Israel and Palestine, right?
Yeah.
So if they can do it, we've got to do it.
Yeah, I love it. Can you define the sacred gardener? What a beautiful phrase.
Yeah, I've never been asked that question. I think we've all been entrusted with a seed in our pocket.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful story that you tell from Auschwitz.
Yeah, it was actually Birkenau across the way.
Oh,
but
okay. Sorry.
No, fair enough. That was yeah. And I picked up a seed, and the metaphor for me of that seed is it's teeming with life, right? That it's encoded with its divine assignment. It knows the forest it has the potential to growing into. What am I going to do to ensure that it grows to its fullest potential? For me, that's what it means to be the sacred gardener of our own life. That's why the responsibility gets so real when we start doubting ourselves, or when we start, thinking I'm not enough. And I'm with you, Joey. I had a face down in the arena moment this morning, where I goofed. I had a human moment, and I'm like, but this is what helps me grow. And then I didn't let it resonate with me too long, because it's part of my journey. I have to know it's going to benefit me somewhere down the line. I have to trust that. So the reason that's chapter 12 is because I think to really grok what it means to manifest your divine assignment, manifest that forest of 10,000 oak trees and this acorn that I picked up, that it's a simple, like you said, simple, not hard act of practicing whatever skills and tools. There, I just made up a word, that we have in our toolkit. Again, the 12 skills that I mentioned are additives if they're not already in your toolkit as already. But for me, they work collectively. And I just discovered it for myself, truly, in the process of writing the book, because I was living them.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love it. And, Voltaire said that we all must tend our garden, but you got to start with the seed. That's a big idea. But a seed is start with that one seed, tend that one seed. I have a little garden patch, and someone must have, in the mulch, someone threw out a patapan squash. So I had these plants start to cut. I did my garlic, and I noticed there were these other little plants. And I didn't pull them. I said, I wonder what's happening here. What are these beautiful little plants? So I've waited patiently all summer, and I was convinced that they were cucumbers, because we grew big yellow flowers. My neighbor's got big yellow flowers on zucchini. I'm going, what's going on? I get these patapan squash. And they came from this little seed that was in the mulch. It wasn't designed. I didn't set out to grow this squash. And every morning I have these beautiful yellow trumpet flowers on 3 plants, and getting a little of the squash. And that resonated with me so much. And I can't imagine going to Birkenau and going to Auschwitz but then to find that seed there and new life coming from, and you talk about Viktor Frankl, right, in the book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk about courage.
Yes. So we're
choice, courage and choice.
Yes. The empowerment, the repowerment is a choice. Yeah.
We chose freedom.
Yeah.
Can you imagine choosing freedom in that environment?
No, his work and also Eli Wiesel's Night are powerful. Yeah. Powerful, life-changing works. Because we're getting so short on time, there's one more thing I want to ask before we, how can people go out and get your work, and what are you working on? Compassionate California, tell us about.
Oh, yeah. Well, through S.A.R.A.H, I heard about the Compassionate Cities movement through the Charter for Compassion. And I discovered that a city of compassion is where the mayor affirms the city is a city of compassion, but it requires engagement from the Department of Education and Social Services and the grassroots community. And it's when everybody comes together, agrees to this document called the Charter for Compassion, which, by the way, Karen Armstrong received the very first TED Prize. I think it was $100,000 for her argument that our world needs compassion, and compelling argument, and she received this for her talk. She received this award, and with that money, she started the charter, or she wrote the Charter for Compassion. Then the organization started. She didn't start it, but the organization started, and they decided to go city by city. Well, when I heard about this, I went right to my S.A.R.A.H sisters and our board of directors, and I said, we could do a city of compassion where we are at, but we were kind of scattered around a number of different cities. And we couldn't decide whose city to do. So we said, just let's go do our own cities. Each one of us agree to go off and, appeal to the mayor to consider this and bring together, because we knew everybody in the community at all these different levels, because we'd been doing this work for, at the time, it was about 10 or 15 years. And so we started getting real energy. And I thought, you know what, since we're doing all the cities, let's just think big and go right to the state. When we get enough cities of compassion, we'll go to the governor and go, look what's happening in this state. Now you can meet us there. And what happens when you bring top government with grassroots, and you can create that coherence again, right?
Yeah.
So it outgrew S.A.R.A.H. As a matter of fact, not any one group should be at the core of this. And interfaith and education and healthcare and all the different sectors have a role around the table, but no one should be the table. And we were that table. So we pulled back. I stepped back from leading it about 3 years in. And then eventually it made it to the governor's desk.
Nice.
And it is an SB law. But now the real work begins. Now the task is on, right?
Yeah.
It's game on.
I think there's a lot of people watching California with a lot of hope.
Yeah. And, compassion isn't the warm and fuzzy word that most people think it is. Compassion is hard and prickly if you're doing it right. It's being willing to see the suffering in another and having the desire to do something about it. That's why, my original vision was license plates, state of compassion license plates. Whatever we can do to get into the lexicon, whatever we can do to get on, in the critical mass to start using this word and really learning what it meant to be compassionate when it's not comfortable.
Right.
I brought the Compassion Games, which is another initiative that I was a part of, to the women's prison in Southern California. And they had such remarkable reaction and response to it. It was the first time in the recorded history of the prison, and that prison's, I think, 60 or 70 years old, had never had one day of recorded incident of violence. We played the games for 11 days, and I'll share with you real quick what the games are. The 11 days, not one recorded incident of violence, because they knew if somebody messed up, then, or there was a fight or something, it would blow it for the whole place, and they wouldn't get their frosted cake at the end, which was a delicacy in the prison. They were so into it. They created their own ecosystem. They made all the rules. They discovered decided how they were going to do it as a committee. The warden had never seen anything like it before, but it was because they were coming together in compassion.
Right.
Compassion Games is a competition to cooperate. And there was a point system, and it was so much fun. I heard so many great stories. Yeah. I'll have to write another book.
Yeah, I love that you brought up, Joe Campbell always talked about follow your bliss. Bliss isn't like joyous. It's hard and it's difficult. It's difficult to be authentic. And to me, as a social justice activist, although I don't like that term anymore for a lot of reasons, but it was always I never settled for tolerance. I was like, guys, tolerance is an ugly word. Tolerance is a word that I don't like you. There's something wrong with you, but I'm going to
tolerate you.
Yeah. But acceptance. And I just thought that resonated with compassion. So thank you for that. That's amazing. What are you working on now? What's next for Sande Hart?
Well, the audiobook is almost complete. I've recorded all the chapters. Then I called my friend, Native American flute and composer Jerry Littlejohn, which I'm wondering if anybody in the audience knows who she is. She plays for all the indigenous elders when they call on her before her, an event or what have you, or at an event, and just for ceremony and ritual. She's just extraordinary. And I said, can I use one of your songs to kind of lace through and under the chapters? And she said, yeah, but I really think the Liminal Odyssey needs its own album, because every chapter has a different energy. And so she actually studied it and composed an entire album. And I believe it's in post-production right now. And I believe I'm not misspeaking. And so hopefully that'll be out soon. Yeah. And I don't know what's next. I can't wait to find out.
That's I had a feeling you were going to say that. You're waiting
Really?
to be surprised, and I love that. So the
I'm
book,
prepared to be surprised. Yeah.
Amazon, what's the best way to get it? How do you prefer
Yeah,
folks?
however you like to buy books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you come through the website, there's a discount code Alchemy, promo code Alchemy, and I'll
Oh,
slide
okay.
a little gift in there for you as well. And
Uh-oh.
yeah, free shipping, so it kind of works a little bit better from Prime.
So I can't remember. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
liminalodyssey.com,
Okay.
which is how you can reach me, and or sandyhart.com, but do go to liminalodyssey.com.
Okay, cool. And for book code.
Thank you, Joe. You're such a great.
Oh no, we have to. No, I mean.
Now I'm going to read everybody's comments here. Thank you.
Yeah.
What a
Okay,
great.
I want to give you the last word before we part. Give us a parting thought.
Oh, I'm not good at these things.
Oh, it doesn't have to be.
No, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for holding this space. I want to thank you all for listening with reverence and paying it and showing up to listen to Joey regularly. And I'm so grateful to be here. I always go to gratitude. And you know what you wrote in the review of my book was just overwhelmingly stunning for me, because you really the brilliance of your insight completely, for me, your knowledge and your insight were very prevalent. And so I'm just so grateful for you for showing up with all of your skills and tools and wisdom and knowledge, and honoring your ancestors and operating in a way because your children are watching you and your audience is watching you. I just love how you have this tribe. I love you. I love all of you. I'm just so in love.
Awesome. See, I knew you were going to nail it. That's why I asked. I knew you were going to nail it. So, guys, we are out of time. You can go. You'll see. I don't want to talk about. I want to just stay in the moment right now. Usually, I bring the guests out, but I'm going to leave Sandy on screen tonight. As I say, thank all of you. I'm so grateful. Read this book because you should. I don't know how else to say that. I mean, you got a little tiny taste, but you don't know what the 12 skills are. Go find them. As Sandy said, you're probably practicing them, but the awareness of going, aha. And I have to tell you, 30 years with the hero's journey, and I went, the spaces in between, that's huge. Sandy, you're absolutely right. You're the first one to talk about that. If Joe was around right now, and he's probably watching, he would just go, yes. He would go, yes.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
thank you.
So, guys, good night. Good night, everyone. And I'll see you next week. We're going to talk about mysteries of the moon, something a little different. So with Constance Victoria Briggs. So very cool. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Do you know Constance?
We had her on our program at S.A.R.A.H.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, we'll talk about small world. So there you guys go. There you go.
Synchronicity.
That's our little heart-shaped stone in the sand right now. That's amazing.
Yeah.